We have lots to talk about in today's video, including the latest trade speculation heading into the offseason. Today we focus on Toronto, Ottawa, Detroit, San Jose, and the latest on Patrik Laine. Columbus fired head coach Pascal Vincent today. We also have coaching updates in Winnipeg and St. Louis, and signings in Utah, as well as Tampa and Philly. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to cover here today. In case you missed it earlier, we'll start with the most recent breaking news. There is a video on the channel with a little bit more analysis, but I will mention it here briefly that the Blue Jackets have fired head coach Pascal Vincent. Of course, new GM Don Waddell's only been on the job a short time, but took some time, but not a lot, to make a decision on the coaching situation, and has decided that he's moving on from Vincent and wants to hire a new head coach. His statement that he put out earlier tonight when this news was first announced was that he consulted and reviewed everything. After talking to Pascal, is determined that he's a really good person, but feels that they need a new person behind the bench. And at the end of the day, I concur with him. I think Pascal Vincent was somebody who had been in the running for head coaching jobs for a long time. He was a well-respected, very experienced coach. He's 52 years of age. This was his first head coaching gig in the NHL. Mind you, we got it under unique and very difficult circumstances, taking over from Mike Babcock after being fired, late into last offseason before training camp started. Like I said, odd scenario, difficult scenario. But still, and to be honest, I think he had an opportunity here and fumbled the ball. Pascal Vincent, after, like I said, all that experience and all that leading up to this, made baffling decisions. And to me, it was to some degree with some of the vets, but a lot of it around the youngsters especially. A lot of benchings that didn't make any sense, ice time. Allocation didn't make a lot of sense some nights. Just completely bizarre decisions, which I, at the time, found extremely weird. This is a guy who's built up his resume and his career. Started out coaching 11 years in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, 8 of which with the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles. Had a lot of success, was a well-respected guy. He's coached a long time in the NHL and AHL. Since then, of course, he was a American Hockey League head coach with the Jets organization. He ended up being an assistant coach in Winnipeg and then Columbus before this. And, he's had a lot of experience. He's had to work with a lot of different people. And honestly, I thought he would be a great candidate. I mean, I know they went in with Vincent internally mostly because of the fact that it was short term and they didn't have a lot of time to react to this, but he was a guy that was kind of looked upon as being one of your next type of up and comers, and to me, just didn't go well. It made a lot of weird choices. So at the end of the day, I think Columbus made the right call here. So if you want further analysis on that, jump over to the other video after this one. But yeah, that's the biggest news of the day so far here. Not overly surprising. Of course, the rest of the staff right now is safe. Sounds like Don Waddell is going to let the new head coach make some of those decisions once they determine who that's going to be. The Winnipeg Jets have confirmed they've added a couple of members to their coaching staff. Of course, under Scott Arniel, so Dean Chenault, who was formerly of the Maple Leafs, Davis Payne, who has most recently worked with the Ottawa Senators, both very well experienced assistant coaches, will join Arniel on the Jets staff. We also got word today that the St. Louis Blues are bringing back former goaltender Brian Elliott. Of course, Elliott had a long career, probably played his best hockey in St. Louis. There was a long stretch there where he and Jake Allen were the tandem 1A, 1B type of scenario, and they were phenomenal there for quite a while. Elliott was good in a lot of different stages of his career, but when I think of him, I think of probably his best hockey, at least in my opinion, being in St. Louis. So they've hired him now to be a goalie scout and development coach. He hasn't played in, I'm not really sure that we've even seen an official announcement on his retirement as a player. Maybe I missed that, but I know he hasn't played. I think it's 1 or 2 years now. So, but a great hire, long time, very well experienced guy. So he comes back to the Blues organization, which the St. Louis Blues, better than just about any NHL franchise, really stay connected with their alumni. And it seems like the alumni, like a lot of players, seem to stick around in the area and end up working either within the organization or within other levels of hockey to help, to lower levels of youth hockey and all that stuff. So it's great to see. No surprise that they've brought in yet another member of as a former player there. A bunch of signings today, 4 in total, 2 of which in Utah, which theoretically, after the NHL announced that their sale closed and the franchise is officially an NHL 32nd franchise as of just a few days ago, technically these are your first Utah signings in franchise history. The first one being 2023 third-round pick Noel Nord. He's a 6'2", 200-pound forward out of Sweden. Gets his playing in Sweden. Gets his 3-year ELC. No word yet exactly where he's going to play next year, but at least he gets his ELC on the books. He still very well could play in Europe one more season before making the jump. And Julian Lutz, also a 2022 second-round pick, 6'2", 194-pound forward, also with a 3-year ELC. German-born player, but has been playing in the United States in the USHL. A couple other signings, including Philly signing defenseman Adam Ginning. He gets a 2-year deal. The AAV is $787.5 thousand. It is a 2-way deal in year 1 and a 1-way deal in year 2. So I would suspect pretty good chance he starts this year in the American Hockey League, but gets an opportunity to play. I'm not sure how many, but some games for sure in the NHL. And then the goal here is for him to be ready to be a full-timer on the roster for next year. So we'll see how that works out for Ginning and Philly. And Tampa have signed forward Gabriel Fortier. He also gets a 1-year, 2-way contract at league minimum at the NHL level. Now, on a variety of rumors today, that's been a busy day in that sense when it comes to all the different trade speculation. It really sounds like once the Stanley Cup final is done, leading between there and the draft, that there could be a decent amount of activity. I know there's a lot of things percolating by the sounds of things. Hard to say exactly when the floodgates will open, but I think we're getting closer and closer to. Let's start with Toronto. I know we heard a couple of things today. One was quite surprising. I know when it comes to Mitch Marner, I've seen one piece of information regarding Marner in a trade, and then I've seen this morning on TSN, I think it was First Up with Carlo Koliakovo, Darren Dreger, TSN Insider, was on his show. He was on there a fair bit and talking about the whole situation involving Marner, and Dreger had a completely different take. So essentially what Dreger said this morning was kind of surprised a lot of people, but we shouldn't be. You got to remember, if you take it back a number of years, when Mitch Marner was negotiating the current contract he has with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Darren Dreger always seemed to get the latest intel. I swear that Paul Marner, Mitch's dad, is like in his ear. At least that's the way a lot of people kind of took it. And I remember on social media, every time Dreger would post anything regarding Marner or that situation, any updates as they were going through it, everybody was like, okay, thanks, Paul. Like, they were calling him Paul Marner. Like, it just, a lot of people thought that Mitch's father, who is notorious and historically speaking and being very much involved in his business and negotiations, was feeding him information. And I wouldn't be shocked if it was true. I can't verify if it is or it isn't, but Dreger's always been very pro-Marner, I guess you could say. He said this morning that he thinks that if the Leafs get a trade offer that they really like and they feels like makes the team better in the long term, that they will absolutely go to Marner to discuss it. He said if Marner gets the feeling that I'm not wanted here anymore and you can send me to a team that I really like with a big fat contract extension, okay, I guess, since you don't want me, I'll consider that and maybe I'll do it. Of course, the main team that we've only really heard so far, anybody's kind of gone on record to say that they feel will be around it, will be Vegas, which I know Friedman said that. But then Dreger goes on to say, but he thinks the Brad Treliving would really prefer to extend Marner rather than trade him. And at this point, it's got a lot of people saying, yeah, you watch, they're going to end up running it back. They're not going to make any changes that are really significant at all because, Matthews and Nylander aren't going anywhere. They just signed brand new long-term deals here in the past year, and really wouldn't make sense for them to move those guys anyway. And then you've got Tavares, who's got 1 year left, no move clause. Wouldn't have as much value as Mitch because of the difference in where he's at in his career, age, and all that stuff, production compared to contract, all that. And everybody feels like if John Tavares was asked about waiving, there'd be no chance. He's like, listen, I'm going to fulfill this contract. And if you don't want me, don't sign me after that, but I'm riding things out here. At the same time, as far as getting an extension done, I think at this point, listening to the fans on social media, like it doesn't sound like very many people want to see Marner come back, and unless he would be willing to take a really sweet team-friendly contract. And I just don't see it happening. History has indicated to us that Marner, Nylander, Matthews, none of them are taking discounts. They want max money and max bonuses and all the best terms, or they ain't signing. It's just that simple. That's the way it's been. And I think that really was amplified by the fact that they rolled up the red carpet and gave everything to Tavares, who wasn't even in the organization. So, that's just the way things have been, and it's going to be tough to break that and get a mentality of, taking less for the betterment of the team to try to build a winner. They seem to not get that option, but a lot of other teams do. And I know I've seen a lot of people say, well, why can't the Leafs get their stars to take discounts or to take deals? I don't know. It's just the way things are wired there. It's difficult to say. It boils down to the players and the people at the end of the day. So should they sign Marner? Should they trade Marner? I mean, to me, I understand that they shouldn't make a trade just for the sake of making a trade. But in my opinion, they've had this core group of guys together for like 7-8 years. Like, they can't run it back again after one playoff series victory in like an 8-year stretch. Like, they got to make some significant change of some sort, right? Like, it would make the most sense moving Marner. Like, I've said all along, I think they should move him, but they need to be very, very careful. Because at the end of the day, he is an important player. He is a very productive player. The last thing they want to see is him to leave and go figure it out somewhere else. But so far, Mitch Marner's history has dictated to us that he's not going to be the type of player that you're going to see, doing all the things in the playoffs that some of these guys are wired to do, anything necessary to win. It just doesn't seem to be in his DNA. Now, could it change? Sure. I guess you never know. Players do adapt and make changes as they get older and more mature. But, with any certainty, you can't suggest that. But they got to make sure they get great pieces coming back, or they're going to really kick themselves, which, like I said, everybody's been saying, unless they get a trade that absolutely is like amazing, they're not going to pull the trigger on it, and they'll deal with this as they go along, which makes the most sense. I did see some other information today about maybe the Islanders being a team to watch when it comes to Mitch Marner, likely due to the fact of the Lou Lamoriello factor. Of course, being connected to when he worked with the Leafs, was around Marner for a few years, seen him firsthand. I've seen one suggestion that the Leafs and the Islanders have been having some trade discussions. I can't verify that they have, of course, but there was some speculation that maybe they had been, but it probably wasn't going to go too far because, or at least if it was, the Islanders were going to have to give up something significant in a piece that, fans might not be too happy about it. I would suggest that if I'm Brad Treliving and I'm talking to Lou Lamoriello about a potential Marner trade, the number one player I want back is Noah Dobson. Now, that would be a big blow to their blue line to lose Dobson. He's an emerging top 10, top 12 defenseman in the NHL, 70, 80 points, terrific offensive vision, great skater, good size, lots to like about Dobson, and he's only going to get more, more wise, more strong, better. Like he's not even completely in his prime yet. So to me, like, there's lots to like about his upside. And he could be the centerpiece going to the Leafs in a Marner trade. There would have to be more pieces than him, but that would be a great starting point. But then your blue line is so much different. I don't know if you really do that, right? That's the thing. That's why these trades are so difficult, because you're having to give up something significant. And if you're giving up something significant and you're getting something significant, it's a lot of times challenging to come out being the better team. Like, look at what Florida did with the Matthew Tkachuk trade. At the time, a lot of people thought the Flames made out as bandits. They got Uyghur and Huberdeau. They both signed extensions. Everything's looking great. You get two really good players for one really good player. And look what's happened. Complete implosion by the Flames, and the Panthers have been back-to-back in the Stanley Cup final. Might even be Cup champions here in a few days. Who knows? Like, you got to be careful. So, at the end of the day, we'll see if the Islanders stuff, if there's anything to that. We'll see if there's anything to what Dreger's saying about Marner maybe being extended. I honestly don't think that's the case. I really don't believe that we're going to see a Marner extension this summer. I'm not 100% sold on the fact we get a trade, but I do think if he's not traded, that he comes back and rides out the 1 year remaining on his deal. His agent is also notorious for pushing his clients to UFA and getting to market. So I honestly think that has just as great of a likelihood of working out as a trade does. I don't see an extension happening, but I'll be shocked if it does, but we will see what happens. On to some other teams here around the NHL. San Jose, of course, introduced new head coach Brian Rosofsky today. So GM Mike Greer, talking to the media, did make some comments regarding Captain Logan Couture, who has been mentioned on the rumor front as maybe being a veteran out there that might be moved this offseason, and he completely shut down rumors regarding that. Now, I'll caution you again, like I've said before, GMs, they're not going to come out and tell you their plans. You gotta take what they say with a grain of salt, because they're not going to come out and be like, yes, I'm going to trade that guy, or no, I'm not. How many times have we seen a GM say, yeah, I have no intention of trading him, and then a month later, a week later, whatever, he's gone. Happens all the time. They're not going to tell you what their plans are. It's just that simple. But to some degree, sometimes you can kind of take a little bit of it and be like, okay, well, here's what kind of makes sense. And like I've said before, a Couture trade was going to be very complicated anytime soon anyways, because they can't retain salary. They only have 3 retaining spots. Every NHL team can retain salary a maximum of 3 contracts. They've already done that when they traded Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, and Tomas Hertl. Those contracts, none of them are expired yet, so they're still retained money on all of them. So to trade Couture at the full value of his contract would be extremely challenging, at least unless he's going to another team who's low in the standings, rebuilding, and lots of cap space, which I don't think he'd be thrilled about. It doesn't make sense. So I don't think any team that's contending or is closer to winning, I can't see them taking him at $8 million. You'd have to get a third party to do a salary retention. So again, not saying it couldn't happen, but it's not as simple as it sounds. It would be complicated. There would have to be a third party broker. And he says that he's a perfect guy to have around to lead the young players on the team. And he's not wrong. If he really likes his captain and thinks he's a great player and a good guy to lead and to help those guys, everything he said is theoretically true. But at the same time, he also said, not today, but in the past, since he's been going and handling his rebuilds, he said if any of these veteran players want out, that he would do his best to accommodate. And he did that, with some of the other guys. So I fully suspect if Logan Couture says, I would like to be traded, he'll try his best. And if the offer there is right, that makes sense for the team, then they'll do it. But again, I always thought this trade was going to be less likely anyways, just because of the complexity around the contract and the health of the player and everything like that. So I don't suspect he'll be a player that gets moved this offseason. Can't completely rule it out, but it's certainly a lot less likely than some of the other people we've been talking about. Some notes here from Elliott Friedman. I talked about a couple of things on the Jeff Merrick show today for Detroit, because Elliott was asked by Merrick, what are some of the teams that you're kind of keeping a close eye on? You think you're busy with lots of conversations? Like, what's the kind of the hot things that you're watching closely right now that you think could be, I guess, ready to have some news for us here soon enough? And he mentions Detroit and he mentions Ottawa. He mentions Detroit, that he thinks Steve Yzerman might be intrigued by the goalie market, and that there's a lot of, experienced, interesting names out there that are expected to be available for trade and very well could change teams this offseason. We know Jacob Markstrom's out there. We know that there's been a lot of talk about UC Saros. I know Barry Trotz, whenever he's commented on it, still insists he wants to sign him. I don't know that that's really the case. I think they'd like to sign him. I just don't think they're going to want to sign him for the amount of term and money he wants. So I think it's more likely he gets traded. So you get Saros, you get Markstrom. Obviously John Gibson's name has been out there for some time as well. And we know Linus Ullmark is another name. And there's others. Korpisalo in Ottawa, not that he's been... I don't think his, a lot of people are going to be beating down Ottawa to take Korpisalo, but, there's lots of names out there. That's the point here. And Friedman thinks that Yzerman, with some uncertainty around the crease in Detroit, that he's intrigued by the goalie market and might make a move between the pipes. I mentioned before, I do wonder if he would consider moving Ville Husso for the right deal. I think Alex Laine has been really good for them. He was good in Florida before that. I think they'll probably try to retain him. They had James Reimer last year. He's at the UFA. Not sure. I mean, I could see maybe heading back. But if Yzerman can find an upgrade and have a more proven starter with Laine being the 1B, I think that puts him in a better scenario and situation. So we'll see. Obviously, lots of things happening. Doesn't mean it happens, but I can understand why Yzerman would be intrigued by that and would want to check into it and see if he can upgrade his team. On Ottawa, he mentions again that Matthew Joseph's name is out there. So certainly no big surprise. We've heard this periodically over the last couple of weeks. So he could be moved more of a... I'm not sure really we can say it's a cost-cutting measure because they're not in a terrible spot cap-wise. More than anything, just to change the dynamic of the bottom six. I mean, Joseph is a guy who's a terrific skater, pretty good on the penalty kill, but like some of these guys, get tons of speed, but no finish. And that's the issue with him. A very inconsistent player, too. He can be red hot for, 10, 15, 20 games and then disappear for 10, 15, 20 games. In his first half of the season, everybody was like, oh, thank God they didn't trade this guy. He's been awesome. But they were also dealing with a ton of injuries. And he was getting to play higher in the lineup, more ice time, and then as they get healthier and he going to get back into his more, logical spot, and even as the team wasn't fully healthy, he was kind of at times because he wasn't being as consistent as you'd like him to be. Eventually his second half was cold as ice. So again, a player that they'd like, and it's just a player that often leaves you wanting more. I do like his speed. I do like his, what he brings, energy and all that. But I can see why they feel like they might be able to upgrade. And the name that Elliott mentioned today was intriguing, was Brandon Tanev in Seattle. Now, the reason for me that was intriguing, and he mentions it as well during his radio hit, was not just because really, if you think about it, Brandon Tanev to me is not a better player than Matthew Joseph. Different kind of player, very different. You're going to lose speed, but you're going to get more physicality, more of a grinder, that type of thing. Pretty decent guy in the bottom six, good leader, been around the league a while, different style of game. But he mentions that he was told that because they've been super interested in Chris Tanev, of course, Brendan's brother. They were trying to trade for him earlier in the year. It didn't happen. Now he's going to be a pending unrestricted free agent if Dallas doesn't re-sign him. And the belief is they might trade for his brother as an effort to lure him to Ottawa to try to get the Tanev brothers on the same team, which a lot of brothers, if they can play together, even if it's only 1 or 2 years, they will take that any day of the week, generally speaking. Now, of course, there are different stages of their career, want to win and all that. So, Ottawa could be a better team this year. Are they a cup contender knocking on the door? No, they're not. They haven't reached that yet. They could be a playoff team maybe, but that's, and hard to say. But they haven't proven that they're a real legit cup contender right now. So, I don't know. But both Tanev brothers possibly being in Ottawa is an intriguing thought. We'll see if anything comes together for that. Patrick Laine is another name I want to take a look at here as well. And a very, very hot topic of a player since it was revealed a few days back that he would like to be traded out of Columbus, that he does want out and would like a fresh start. Apparently that request was made, I think, even before Don Waddell got there, before he was even in the player assistance program. Then he ended up having a shoulder, they called it a cleanup surgery, some kind of, didn't sound like it was a serious injury or anything like that. And one article I came across today suggested a trade for Laine to Waddell's old team in Carolina. And I mentioned this before, to be honest, and even dating back to when he left Winnipeg, when it was believed that he was likely going to get moved, being obviously they have a lot of Finn players there, and some of these guys he's played with internationally, has connections with, and it just might be a good way for him to kind of get back on track, and obviously Waddell would know the dynamic in Carolina extremely well. He would know those players extremely well as far as what he might be able to bring to Columbus in a trade like that. It might be tricky as well dealing with his former team. Sometimes that happens. We know the Flames and Leafs have had a lot of talks, and Craig Conroy has been kind of leery about dealing with Brad Treliving in Toronto. This is a little bit of a different scenario, but still same idea. could get complicated. But, you know, a couple of names that I've seen mentioned, the main one would be Jesperi Kotkaniemi, maybe going to Columbus. Of course, a player that Waddell was very much involved with, getting that offer sheet and getting him to Carolina. You know, Columbus is a whole different animal right now compared to Carolina. It gets that contract off their books. If you get Columbus and Waddell retaining some money on Laine, you know, he's making 8.7, but if you knock that down to, say, you know, 6 or something like that, you know, even less. I mean, maybe they retain 50%. Who knows? But if you're retaining 50%, you're doing the other team a favor. You're hoping for a bigger return. You know, getting that 50%, you know, that's pretty substantial. Like, you know, you'd be down to like, what would it be, like just under 4.2, right? Or just over 4.2. So, like, that's pretty good. Kotkaniemi wouldn't be enough on his own, I wouldn't think, but you know, a guy like Jack Drury's been mentioned in Carolina before as a player who wants more opportunity as well. Maybe he's a name that they could look to. You know, I've seen somebody mention Kuznetsov could be a player to go as well from a money perspective to make things more feasible from a cap perspective. And we know that the Jackets could certainly use a lot more depth down the middle. You know, suddenly you add Kuznetsov and Kotkaniemi. Well, now you have a lot more depth down the middle, and you get Laine his fresh start. But I would think that he might want, you know, one of their younger players, because they do have some good young talent there that's up and coming in Carolina too. They've drafted well, even though they haven't been picking very high. So we'll see. But Laine to Carolina does make some sense. I can see how the math could work. Maybe Kotkaniemi is the main piece going back as well. I did see another one as well, a mock trade. Somebody suggested, and this was just somebody on social media. It was nobody with any connections or anything. Laine back to the Winnipeg Jets. Can you imagine that? And Ehlers was the return going the other way. And Laine and Ehlers were like best buddies when they were both in Winnipeg. That'd be funny if they were traded for each other. I don't see Ehlers wanting anything to do with going to Columbus. If he wants out of Winnipeg, to me, he's used to being on a team that's been in the playoffs and contending. I would think more likely that he's probably going to want to go to another team that's, you know, further ahead in their progression towards winning, but hard to say for sure. He's been linked to a bunch of teams too, but I don't see that deal happening myself. I think Laine would be better off with a team like the Canes, for example, but we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.